What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Phillies sports history for July 12th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Feel Good Friday edition of the podcast. Yes, I'm calling a rainy, dreary Friday Feel Good because the rain is much needed. It's going to cool things off for a day or two. And truthfully, we need the rain. I haven't mowed my grass in like 2 weeks. One, because it's been so hot and I refuse to do it when it's hot. But two, it hasn't even grown because of no rain. So when I come back from the shore, it will be nice and ready to be mowed. Just in time for it to be 98 degrees Tuesday when we come back. But that's a whole other story for another time. But we are officially in the dog days, and it's been a relatively quiet day on the Phillies sports front. So it might not be as long of a podcast today as you're normally used to, but that's simply because there's just not a lot going on, and I'm not going to just ramble on for the sake of rambling on. But let's start with the Phils, and the big news was Zach Wheeler will miss Sunday's start as a precaution, allow him to rest and get 100% healthy. I did hear an interview with Rob Thompson, said he's not concerned about it. Zach was feeling already better, and they're just holding him out to be safe at this point. JT was taking batting practice, and he will, over the All-Star break, be going down to Clearwater to get some rehabbing in, and should be back. If he's not back for that first series after the break, it should be relatively soon. So he is coming back. Help is on the way. But that game last night, they completed the sweep of the Dodgers 5-1. Aaron Nola was sharp. They were making timely catches, playing some good defense, specifically one Johan Rojas. And I think at this point, since he's been called back up, he may have played his way into staying on the roster. He's hitting a little bit better. And again, if he plays defense like he did last night, that catch was absolutely ridiculous. That is why he's on the team. And if he can give you anything offensively, he's been hustling. He's been getting some bunts down, getting some timely hits as well. I think we need to keep him on this team. Whether or not that changes what they do at the trade deadline, that still remains to be seen. I personally, excuse me, I could see them making a big move. But, I mean, you can never have, in the wise words of Ruben Amaro Jr., which you could see what he did as GM, you can never have too much pitching. So if they can go out and get a couple bullpen arms, maybe a bat off the bench, I'm okay with that. But that game, or that catch last night by Rojas was just ridiculous. Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, Brandon Marsh all hit homers. And it was a great series. I think they all talked about how for them it was a little bit bigger than a normal series, more of like a measuring stick, and the crowd was certainly into it. And some of the things they did last night for the 80s retro night, I don't know if you've seen this, but look up some of the things they had on the video board and some of the songs and just different skits and things they were playing. Good time last night at the ballpark. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that terribly hot either, so it would have been a good day to be there. And then to top it off, the Braves lost last night 1-0. So the Phillies are going into this final series before the All-Star break with minimum a 9-game lead. The Braves are out in San Diego tonight for a 4-game series. But right now, the lead stands at 9.5. And if you can have that at 10 going into the All-Star break, that is a good time. So they are off tonight. And then they start the 3-game series with the Oakland A's, the good old school Philly City series, A's versus Phillies, starting Thursday. Or no, I guess they do play tonight. Today's Friday, yeah. So they play Oakland tonight. My days are all mixed up. So the Phillies will play Oakland tonight in Citizens Bank Park, the old school City series, back when the A's were in Philly. So I'm talking to you a lot about Philly Goat. They have the Kruk is my spirit animal shirt, and 10% of those proceeds will go to the Battle Brothers Foundation to help our veterans out. The shoes, I'm wearing the Schmitties once again. They've become my go-to shoes this summer. That's how comfortable they are, and I highly recommend checking out these canvas loafers. I have not tried them with jeans yet. I have a feeling they will work with jeans though, so go to phillygoat.com, check out their selection of t-shirts, the shoes, and you will not be disappointed. Be sure to use the promo code Jim Montgomery to take 10% off your order. That's phillygoat.com, promo code Jim Montgomery to take 10% off of your order. Also today, my boys over at the Clashing Conferences podcast, they have their new baseball episode out, the inaugural episode. Be sure to go check them out. They're doing great things over there. My boy Steven produces it all, and we've been trying to just coordinate with him to get some things going for this podcast. But go check them out. The Clashing Conferences podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. I do have some Sixers news. The Vegas Summer League will kick off tomorrow. And then the big news of the day, I am pumped about this. Kyle Lowry signed a one-year veteran minimum contract to come back. He will serve as the backup point guard. Love it for his leadership. He can still play a little bit, albeit not as a starter. So he will be able to provide some minutes off the bench. He's used to Nick Nurse's system as well. So that'll be huge for the young guys, McCain and Bona, getting them kind of adjusted to being under Nick Nurse's system. And I could not be happier about this. I did get worried. I was seeing some reports that a mystery team, not the Suns, was ready to swoop in, but I don't think Kyle Lowry wanted to go anywhere. So I think this is a great signing. Now, if you give me Marcus Morris as one of your backup power forwards, I will gladly take it. Get that Philly connection, the hometown love. Get these guys motivated to win a championship for their hometown. You gotta love it. So Kyle Lowry coming back to Philadelphia next year to serve as the Sixers' backup point guard. All right, today we're going to go visit an old friend and go back to 1906. The Phillies lost to the Cardinals 7-6 out in St. Louis on this day. But our friend from a couple days ago, old Sherry Magee, the same guy that punched out and knocked out the umpire after getting thrown out of the game, went 1 for 3, scored 2 runs, and was hit by a pitch. But the story was he stole 4 bases, which set a franchise record, kind of. More on that in a minute. Of his 4 steals, it included 3 in the 9th inning. When he got hit by the pitch, he stole second, stole third, stole home, and set the franchise record, kind of. It has been tied 2 times since. Garry Maddox did it in 1978. Jayson Werth did it in 2009. So why is this kind of the Phillies franchise record? Well, it's all about the way Major League Baseball classifies records, because you have the pre-modern and the modern records. And this obviously took place in the quote-unquote modern, even though it was 1906. But the modern era began in 1901, which is the same year that the American League was formed. And pre-1901, though, the rules were constantly changing as they were trying to figure out and see what worked. And a lot of the changes oftentimes were radical. For instance, like a foul ball on the third strike, I believe, was an out until they changed the rules. So certain things like that, they messed around with the size of the plate, the distance between the bases and everything. But since 1901, things have been relatively consistent. Obviously, there's been some major ones, the DH, and then bringing the DH into the National League, changing the schedule from 154 to 162, the pitch clock. All of those things have been major changes. But for the most part, the game is played the same way as it has been since 1901. So that's why they sort of separate it. So kind of set the franchise record, because the most stolen bases in a game for the Phillies is 7, set in 1894 by Billy Hamilton. So some places will call that the Phillies team record with an asterisk. Some people say it was Sherry Magee, Garry Maddox, and Jayson Werth. I think for the sake of this podcast, I tend not to go back too often pre-1901 when we're doing our dates. We're going to call Sherry Magee, Garry Maddox, and Jayson Werth the Phillies record holders for stolen bases in a game. And for those of you who are like me, are like, well, what is the Major League Baseball record for stolen bases in a game? I'm glad you asked, because that record is 6, and it's tied by 4 guys, including Philadelphia A's, see how that all ties, the Philly, the A's, all of that connection? Can't make this stuff up. But Eddie Collins did it twice for the A's back in I think it was the 1920s. He did that, or early, like the 19 teens. The last time a player stole 6 bases in the game was Carl Crawford for the Tampa Bay Rays back in 2009. So for our purposes here at this day in Philly sports history, Sherry Magee on this day in 1906 set the modern Phillies franchise record with 4 stolen bases in a game. It was later tied by Garry Maddox and Jayson Werth. I would love to see maybe a Trey Turner or a Johan Rojas set that up today. But that all happened in 1906. Phillies lost to the Cardinals 7-6, but Sherry Magee set the team record with 4 stolen bases in a game, including 3 in the 9th inning, including stealing home against the Cardinals. All right, it is time for the Ultimate Philly Sports Nickname Tournament. We are right in the thick of the second round. And yesterday, out of the Schuylkill region, we had a battle. This thing was tied when I went to bed at like 9:30 after the Phillies game. But the Axeman pulled it out overnight with 55% of the vote, knocking out the Cinderella story J-Roll, the 12 seed, to move on to the Sweet 16. So the Axeman is moving on with 55% of the vote. And then out of the Balboa region, this was just a blowout. And surprisingly, I didn't think, I'm not surprised that he won, but I'm surprised with the margin of victory. The number 3 seed, the Minister of Defense, Reggie White, beat the chairman of the boards, Moses Malone, with 88% of the vote. Reggie just dominated like he did on the field. So Reggie will be moving on to the Sweet 16. So will Jeremiah Trotter. 2 Eagles moving on to the Sweet 16. All right, today we're going to go to the Cheesesteak region first, and we have the number 3 seed, The Answer, taking on the number 11 seed, The Ultimate Weapon. 2 of my all-time favorite players, Randall Cunningham and Allen Iverson, squaring off. And as I said, I'm trying to give you some different tidbits that I didn't give during the first round. But let's start with the number 3 seed, The Answer. Obviously, he's a Philly legend, spent 12 years in Philly. His number 3 is retired, averaged 27.6 points a game for the Sixers, 4-time scoring champ, won the MVP, Rookie of the Year, won 2 All-Star Game MVP in 8 appearances while in Philly. He's on the NBA All-75th Anniversary team, 3-time All-NBA First Team, 3-time All-NBA Second Team. But here's where I'm going to switch it up a little bit. Usually what's not talked about is, and there's a lot of debate about this, is just how good Allen Iverson was defensively. He was a great defensive player, led the league in steals 3 times. In college, he was 2-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. Never made an all-defensive team, though, in the NBA, which is shocking to me. And I think a lot of people questioned his steals, even though they were legitimate steals, because he would anticipate a lot. If you think back to when Iverson played, there were a lot of times where he would jump the passing lane and grab the steal and go on a fast break. And that was a large part of the Sixers' offense back then. But he could do that because of Larry Brown's defensive scheme and his style, plus the players they had around him who were able to slide up and stop that. So it allowed him to be more aggressive. Didn't get the credit I feel he deserved as a defensive player. Never made an All-NBA team. And then, of course, the origin of his nickname comes from a family friend saying, "You're going to be the answer to Georgetown's problems." And like I said, he certainly was the answer to the Sixers' problem. So Allen Iverson is the number 3 seed out of the Cheesesteak region. He is taking on the number the number 11 seed, the Ultimate Weapon, Randall Cunningham, number 12. He was ahead of his time, and I still think he deserves consideration into the Hall of Fame just for the way he revolutionized the game, because you don't have the quarterbacks, and the quarterback play is not what it is today if Randall Cunningham didn't blaze that path. He's one of the first, to me, NFL stars that sort of crossed over into the entertainment world. He dated Whitney Houston, was partying with all of those guys and that whole crew. And I mean, he might not have been the first, but one of the first that I remember in my era. Now everybody is, you have singers, rappers, athletes, they're all sort of intermingled. Back then, it wasn't like that. It was sort of more separated out, but Randall Cunningham crossed over that line. Excuse me, dated Whitney. You could almost even say Randall was one of the first diva-ish players. Maybe not the first diva to play in the NFL, but one of the first ones to publicly have those diva tendencies. He served as Jaws' backup when he came in. Would come in on third and longs because of how fast he was and his ability to pick up first downs. He was kind of like the OG Slash, but much more raw. They never really put him as a receiver or anything like that. And I thought this stat was a good one. This isn't necessarily indicative of Randall's play, but it is indicative of the fact that they didn't really have a good team around him for a lot of his career. He was sacked 72 times in 1986, and he was not the full-time starter the entire year. That's just how bad that offensive line was. He is the first black quarterback to start in a Pro Bowl, which he went to 3 times. He was the MVP in 1990, had a 91-yard punt, and he was the punter at UNLV. If you remember that game against the Giants, punted it from his own end zone, took a couple bounces. Dave Meggett misplayed it, and the ball just kept rolling. You think about the plays he made that when he was at his best, the Bruce Smith play in the end zone in Buffalo, the Pepper Johnson play when he got hit, somehow didn't go down, and then always remember the flip into the end zone against the Giants. Origin of his nickname came from the cover of the Sports Illustrated NFL preview in 1989, who called him the ultimate weapon. But now it's your turn. I'm glad I don't have to vote in this because this is the ultimate Sophie's choice for me. But who do you got in the cheesesteak region? The number 3 seed, the answer. The number 11 seed, the ultimate weapon. 267-495-8531. That'll get you into the Back to the Future voice and text line. Call me, send a text message. Hit me up on social media, Jimbo_Mont, Twitter and TikTok, at Philly Jimbo on Instagram. You can hit me up on Facebook, LinkedIn as well. Comment right there on Spotify, Apple, whatever you got to do. Just get your votes in. But is it the number 3 seed, the answer? The number 3 seed, the ultimate weapon out of the cheesesteak region? And then in our Ben Franklin region, the winner of this will play World Beef free in the Sweet 16. We have the number 1 seed, the Broad Street Bullies, taking on the number 8 seed, Nails/Dude. And for the Broad Street Bullies, it's very clear and simple. They were just a physical, aggressive team. They played on Broad Street, and one of, still to this day, a lot of people's favorite era, especially the old school guys, favorite era of Flyers hockey. They won the 2 cups. They regularly led the league in penalty minutes. Excuse me. The players even looked like bullies. And I think that can't be understated. If you ever take a look at some of the guys from that Broad Street Bullies team, they look like a Broad Street bully, literally. Missing teeth and just drinking beers. And truthfully, they even acted the part. Like they bought in hook, line, and sinker to the Broad Street Bullies name. And truthfully, to me, they seem like guys that you'd want to have beers with and just hang out and go to like an Irish pub and just beat some people up. The origin of their nickname, Jack Chevalier from the Philly Bulletin, gets credit for it, but technically it should be Pete Cafone, who was the headline writer who changed around the order of the words from Chevalier's article. But either way you want to look at it, the Philadelphia Bulletin was responsible for the Broad Street Bullies nickname. And then a number 8 seed, Nails/Dude. I still couldn't decide which one because he's known equally by both of these names. For our younger listeners out there, the younger audience, before he kind of went crazy and got on Howard Stern and all of the issues he had, Lenny Dykstra was a hell of a baseball player before things got crazy. Played for the Mets and the Phillies. Got his name Nails because he was such a hard-nosed player. Played tough. Always had his uniform dirty. People used to talk about, too, always had a big wad of tobacco of how dirty the center field was at the Vet. And obviously he got the nickname Dude because he says dude all the time. There was the Phillies during that 93 team. They would always talk about he couldn't say a sentence without saying at least one dude in it. But he was a 3-time All-Star, won the Silver Slugger in 1993. And another guy who not as known for his defense, but he was a very good defensive player, made a lot of catches out there in center field, and he was clutch. Like in the postseason in 1993, they don't win a couple of those games in the NLCS without Lenny Dykstra coming up with clutch hits. He did his part in the World Series against Toronto. The bullpen just kind of let them down. Fans loved him, and he loved it here for the most part. He missed a lot of games early in his career, too, for injuries. He had the automobile accident where he broke his collarbone with Darren Daulton. Then he broke his collarbone again later that season. Broke his hand opening day in 1992, missed some games. But then once he came back, he was good. And little side note, he was not happy about being traded to Philly at first. Didn't want to leave the Mets. But once the fans started to show him love, and again, to me, Lenny Dykstra, if you take away his post-playing career stuff, he is really like the epitome of what Philly fan. Everybody says, "How do you please Philly fans?" They like we're hard on our. No, we're not hard on our players. We want effort. And Lenny Dykstra, to me, and if you think about all of the guys that have come after him, like a Chase Utley and Jayson Kelsey, those hard blue-collar workers that are going out there every day and doing what they need to do. Allen Iverson, for instance. That's who we like. But to me, that's sort of that Lenny Dykstra sort of mentality. And he was going out there every day. Didn't matter. He wasn't really that concerned about stats. He was trying to win baseball games and would do what he had to do. But Lenny Dykstra, Nails/Dude, is our number 8 seed. So now it's your turn. Who do you got? Better Philly sports nickname. In the Ben Franklin region, the number 1 seed Broad Street Bullies taking on Nails/Dude. And then in the Cheesesteak region, it's the Answer versus the 11th seed, the Ultimate Weapon. Allen Iverson versus Randall Cunningham. Broad Street Bullies versus Lenny Dykstra. Who do you got? Who's the better Philly sports nickname? Get those votes in. 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Get anything else Philly sports related off your chest. Got something to say about the Kyle Lowry situation, Johan Rojas, Phils, whatever's on your mind, call me, get it off. Let's do it. On this day, 1906, Phils lost to the Cardinals 7-6. Sherry Magee set the franchise record with 4 stolen bases in a game. It has since been tied by Garry Maddox and Jayson Werth. But Sherry Magee gets credit for being the first Philly to steal 4 bases in a game in the modern era. We'll have more on the Phillies A's, Sixers Summer League, Union back in action. Can they figure it out, or is it way too late for them? All of that and more coming up tomorrow. But this has been This Day in Philly Sports History for July 12th, 2024. I'm Jim Montgomery. Go have a good, feel-good Friday. Hopefully the cool weather, you can enjoy it even though it's going to rain. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.